Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content. Subscribe and turn on notifications. Robert Thorne was 58 years old, and he was a man built of routine. It was a structure he had assembled himself, brick by brick, over decades. 6:15 in the morning, the alarm would chime, a gentle, digital sound he hadn't changed in a decade. The floorboards would creak under his weight in the same three places on his way to the kitchen. The coffee maker would gurgle to life, a familiar domestic dragon, while the local Denver news played softly from the small television on the counter, its anchors like distant, reliable relatives. He would be out the door by 7:30, ready for his day as the head of operations at a publishing house, a job that rewarded order and predictability. His life was a fortress of his own making. And Helen was supposed to be the queen of that fortress, his wife of 31 years. He watched her now, as she moved through the kitchen, 56 years old, with threads of silver beginning to weave through her dark hair, a map of their shared time. Their marriage, he thought, was like their suburban home, solid, comfortable, the mortgage long since paid off. Their two children were grown, living their own lives in other states, leaving Robert and Helen in a quiet echo of what once was. The silence had grown over the years, but Robert had mistaken it for peace. He believed he knew Helen better than he knew the precise number of steps from his bed to the coffee pot. He knew the way she hummed when she was content, the slight frown she got when concentrating on a crossword puzzle. He thought he knew everything. He was wrong. The fault line that would shatter his fortress began to tremble on a Tuesday in October. Helen walked into the kitchen, and she was glowing. That was the only word for it. She wore a smile he hadn't seen in months, maybe years. It was bright and unreserved, not the gentle, tired smile she usually gave him in the mornings. "Robert, you won't believe it," she said, her voice quick with an energy that felt foreign in the quiet morning air. Her eyes, which had seemed perpetually weary from her administrative job at the university, were shining. "Brenda and Charlotte have planned the most amazing birthday trip for Brenda. It's perfect." She spoke in a rush, explaining the plan. 3 days. A resort up in Breckenridge. A spa, massages, fancy dinners. Just the three of them, rekindling a friendship that daily life had worn thin. "Look," she said, holding her phone out to him. The screen showed pictures of an elegant mountain lodge. Polished wood, stone fireplaces, sprawling balconies with views of snow-dusted peaks. Pools shimmered under glass ceilings. Robert nodded immediately. Genuinely. A wave of relief washed over him, quelling a small, unnamed anxiety he hadn't even realized he was carrying. "That looks wonderful, Helen. You should go. You deserve it." And he meant it. He loved seeing her happy. He had noticed her retreat into herself lately, a slow, quiet withdrawal he'd blamed on work, on age, on the simple exhaustion of life. He'd see her smiling at her phone, a private, secretive little smile, and had told himself it was good she had her own world, her own jokes with friends. He'd noticed the new perfume she'd started wearing, something floral and light, so different from the subtle, warm scent she'd worn for 20 years. He'd chalked it up to a desire for change. He'd noticed, too, how often she talked about her personal trainer, Reese, a young man, full of energy and annoying confidence. "Reese says my form is improving so much," she'd say. "Reese gave me this new diet plan." The name had become a common fixture in their evening conversations. Robert had felt a flicker of something. Annoyance. He dismissed it as petty jealousy. It was good for her. She was getting stronger, healthier. He was supposed to be happy about that. This trip, he thought, watching her scroll excitedly through photos of the resort. This was exactly what she needed. A reset. On Friday morning, the air was crisp. Helen was up before him, a rare occurrence. She packed 2 large suitcases, far more than seemed necessary for 3 days in the mountains. She came to say goodbye at the garage door, dressed in a light sundress that seemed ill-suited for the mountain chill. The floral perfume was strong. He kissed her on the forehead. "Have a wonderful time. Call me when you get there." "I will," she promised, her smile bright but her eyes not quite meeting his. He waved as her car reversed out of the driveway and disappeared down the street. He watched until it was gone, a sudden, strange emptiness settling in the garage around him. He walked back inside, the silence of the house pressing in. He finished his coffee, rinsed the mug, and placed it in the dishwasher. 7:20. He was about to grab his briefcase when his phone, lying on the kitchen island, vibrated. Just once. A short, sharp buzz. He glanced at it. A notification from his banking app. It was linked to the corporate credit card he managed, the one he'd given Helen for the trip, for emergencies, he'd said. Just in case. The message on the screen was automated. Impersonal. Straightforward. A charge of $923 has been processed at the Omni downtown Denver. Robert read the notification 3 times. The words shimmered, refusing to lock into place. The Omni. Downtown. That was 15 minutes from their house. In the heart of the city. Breckenridge was 2 hours away. In the opposite direction. Up in the mountains. Why? Why would she check into a hotel in their own city when she was supposed to be miles away, at a mountain resort? A mistake, his mind supplied, grasping for logic. Maybe she booked the wrong hotel online? No, she had showed him the pictures. The mountain lodge. He looked at the clock on the microwave. 7:32. Helen had left the house only 12 minutes ago. 12 minutes. A cold, heavy knot formed in Robert's stomach. It was a feeling he couldn't name, but one he recognized with a sickening dread, as if a shadow had been lurking in the periphery of his life for months, a shadow he had deliberately chosen to ignore. The phone felt heavy in his hand. He found her name in his contacts. He pressed call. It rang. Once, twice, 3 times, 4. Voicemail. Hi, you've reached Helen. Please leave a message. He hung up, his breath catching in his throat. He took a deep, shuddering breath and called again. The result was the same. Straight to the cheerful, recorded lie of her voice. She wasn't answering. The knot in his stomach tightened, twisting suspicion into something denser, darker, colder. Without a second thought, he grabbed his car keys from the hook by the door. His briefcase lay forgotten on the floor. His routine, his fortress, crumbled into dust around him. He drove towards downtown Denver, his heart pounding a frantic, painful rhythm against his ribs, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. The drive downtown was a blur. Robert drove on instinct, his mind a chaotic storm of denial and horrifying logic. Each red light felt like a personal taunt, prolonging the agony. He tried to construct scenarios, innocent explanations for the impossible facts. Maybe she was picking up Brenda downtown, but Brenda lived north of them. It made no sense. Maybe her car broke down, but the charge was from a hotel, not a repair shop, and she would have called, wouldn't she? 12 minutes. The number echoed in his head. A 12-minute drive from their home to the Omni. She must have driven directly there. No detours, no hesitation. It was a planned destination. He remembered the 2 suitcases. The sundress, the perfume, the private smiles at her phone, the endless talk of Reese. Oh, God. Reese. The pieces of the puzzle, once scattered and meaningless, were now snapping together with horrifying speed, forming an image he didn't want to see. The shadow he had ignored for so long was now lunging at him, taking shape. He felt a profound, sickening stupidity. How could he have been so blind? He, Robert Thorne, the man of details, of operations, of seeing the patterns others missed. He had missed the most important pattern of all, right in his own home. The anger began to bubble then, hot and acidic, rising up from his stomach. It wasn't a loud, roaring anger. It was cold, a quiet, focused rage that sharpened his senses and cleared the fog of confusion. By the time he pulled up across the street from the sleek, glass and concrete facade of the Omni, he was no longer a confused husband. He was an investigator. He was a man walking towards the scene of a crime. He parked the car, his movements stiff and deliberate. He walked across the street, the morning traffic a distant roar. He pushed through the revolving door, entering a lobby that smelled of expensive floral arrangements and polished marble. It was a world of calm, professional luxury, a stark contrast to the maelstrom inside him. He saw 2 attendants behind the long, polished front desk. One was a young woman with a bright, professional smile. The other was an older man. Robert walked towards the young woman, forcing his own face into a mask of polite concern. He pulled out his wallet as he approached. "Good morning," he said, his voice steady, betraying none of the tremor he felt inside. "I need a little bit of help. A favor, really." The attendant smiled back. "Of course, sir. How can I help you?" "My wife," Robert began, the word feeling like ash in his mouth. She checked in here this morning. I just received a notification for the charge on my card, and I'm just trying to confirm that everything is okay with the reservation. I can't seem to reach her. He showed the attendant his own ID, then the transaction alert on his phone. It felt like an out-of-body experience, as if he were watching another man perform these actions. I understand, sir. Let me just check for you, she said, her fingers tapping quickly on her keyboard. She looked at her screen, her brow furrowed for a moment in concentration. Then she nodded. Yes, sir, the reservation is confirmed. Robert held his breath. It's for 3 nights, the attendant continued, her voice cheerful and efficient. Room 412, under the names Helen Thorne and, she paused, reading the screen, and Reese Sterling. The name hit Robert with the physical force of a punch. Reese Sterling. He felt the blood drain from his face. A roaring sound filled his ears, drowning out the soft music of the lobby. It was real. It was all real. The trainer, the confident, smiling young man who was helping his wife feel stronger and healthier. The man whose name had become a constant, irritating presence in his house. Now that name was here, on a 3-night reservation with his wife. 15 minutes from their home. Everything made a painful, nauseating kind of sense. He stared at the attendant, his mind blank for a moment. He had to say something. He had to complete the performance. Ah, he said, forcing a small, brittle laugh. Right, Reese, her colleague. I'd forgotten he was joining her. Thank you so much for your help. The lie was clumsy, pathetic, but the attendant just smiled and nodded, already turning her attention to the next guest. Robert turned away from the desk. His legs felt like lead, but he made them move. He walked towards the bank of elevators, his steps firm, his mind a wasteland. He was no longer a husband or an investigator. He was an executioner. He pressed the button for the elevator. Alone in the polished metal cabin, he stared at his own distorted reflection in the doors. A stranger stared back at him, a pale, grim-faced man with dead eyes. The man he used to be, the one who left the house that morning after kissing his wife on the forehead, was gone forever. He had died in the 12 minutes it took for a notification to arrive. He had died again when a young woman at a hotel desk spoke a single name. The elevator chimed, and the doors slid open onto the 4th floor. The hallway was silent, decorated in muted golds and browns. He walked slowly, his shoes silent on the thick carpet. Room 410. Room 411. He stopped in front of room 412. He stood there for a long moment, listening. He could hear voices from inside, muffled, but clear enough. A man's low chuckle, and then Helen's laughter, the same bright, unrestrained laugh he had heard in the kitchen on Tuesday, a laugh he hadn't heard directed at him in years. A fresh wave of betrayal, hot and sharp, pierced through the cold numbness. He clenched his fists at his sides, his nails digging into his palm. He raised his hand and knocked 3 times. Hard. Deliberate. Each knock a final, damning judgment. The laughter inside the room stopped instantly. The silence that followed was absolute, heavy with sudden panic. Robert could hear frantic movement, the sound of nervous, whispered voices, and a soft thud, as if something had been dropped on the carpeted floor. He waited. His heart was a cold, steady drum in his chest. He was calm, terrifyingly calm. The door opened slowly, cautiously, just a few inches, and there he was. Reese Sterling. He was barefoot, wearing only a pair of gray gym shorts and a tight, black t-shirt that clung to the muscles of his chest. His hair was damp, and his blue eyes were wide with confusion, a confusion that morphed into pure, unadulterated panic as he recognized the man standing in the hallway. He looked younger than Robert remembered, and suddenly, profoundly pathetic. "Where is my wife?" Robert asked. His voice was low, devoid of emotion, but it cut through the silence like a shard of glass. It was a voice he didn't recognize as his own. Reese opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He took an involuntary step back, his athletic confidence evaporating into thin air, and that was when Helen appeared behind him. She emerged from the direction of the bathroom, tying the belt of the hotel's plush, white robe. Her hair was wet, falling in dark strands over her shoulders. Her face, flushed and relaxed just moments before, turned ashen the instant her eyes met Robert's. All the color, all the life, drained from her. She froze, one hand clutching the robe at her throat. For a long, stretched moment, nobody spoke. The only sound was the distant, mechanical hum of the building's air conditioning. "Robert," Helen finally whispered. Her voice was a trembling, broken thing, barely audible. I can explain." Robert raised a hand, a sharp, dismissive gesture that cut her off. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. The cold fury radiating from him was more powerful than any yell. He looked from her pale, horrified face to Reese's terrified one, and then back to her. "Breckenridge," he said, his voice icy, each word a heavy, leaden stone. "With your friends. A spa resort." He let the words hang in the air, a monument to her lies. "You have 3 seconds to tell me the truth, Helen," he continued, his tone flat and final, "or I am calling Brenda and Charlotte right now, on speakerphone, so you can both listen." The silence that followed was deafening. Reese looked like a cornered animal, trying to shrink away, to back further into the room and disappear. But Robert took one step forward, his body blocking the doorway, his presence immense and unmovable. "You stay," Robert commanded, his gaze locking onto Reese. "You are both going to listen to this." Helen crumbled. It was a complete and total collapse. The artifice, the excitement, the lies, it all fell away, leaving behind a sobbing, terrified woman. Tears streamed down her face, and her breath came in ragged, desperate gasps. She leaned against the wall for support, as if her legs could no longer hold her. Between choked sobs, the story spilled out. A story of 4 months. It started innocently, she claimed. Conversations after her training sessions, text messages about diet plans and workout routines. Then, one evening, a smoothie at a nearby cafe. Their talks deepened. He made her feel young, she wept, desired, alive in a way she hadn't felt in years. Robert listened in absolute silence. His jaw was clenched so tightly it ached. His fists were still balled at his sides, white-knuckled and rigid. Each word she spoke was another blow, another crack in the foundation of his 31-year life. He felt nothing but a vast, empty contempt. He wasn't listening to his wife. He was listening to a stranger confessing to the methodical murder of their marriage. When her broken, rambling confession finally trailed off, he turned his cold gaze back to Reese, who stood pale and silent, his eyes fixed on the floor. "And this trip?" Robert asked, his voice still dangerously controlled. "Whose idea was this little getaway?" Reese flinched, but said nothing. It was Helen who answered, her voice thick with tears. "His," she whispered. He said we needed time together, that he was tired of hiding. He wanted to have me all to himself for a few days." A short, bitter laugh escaped Robert's lips. It was a dead, humorless sound. Time together, how romantic. He looked at Reese with pure, undiluted scorn. "And you picked a hotel 15 minutes from our house. You're a real genius." He turned back to Helen, his eyes boring into hers. "And you created an entire narrative. Scottsdale, your friends, a spa. How many details did you invent, Helen? How many times did you practice your lies in the mirror before you told me?" She couldn't answer. She just sobbed, her body shaking with the force of her guilt and shame. Robert pulled his phone from his pocket. His movements were calm and precise. He began typing. Reese finally found his voice, a weak, pleading tone. "Look, man, I'm really sorry. I never wanted it to go down like this." "Don't call me man." Robert cut him off without even looking at him. "You don't have that right." He held up his phone, showing them the screen. He was in a group chat with Brenda and Charlotte. "I'm texting them right now," he said, his voice flat. "They'll be thrilled to know they were used as an alibi so my wife could spend 3 days in a hotel with her personal trainer." He paused, letting the threat sink in, then his eyes landed on Reese again. "Oh, and that corporate card you've been so generously using? It's linked directly to my company's finance department. Every transaction generates an automated report. By the end of the day, my entire accounting team will know you're a cheap gigolo who can't even pay for his own hotel room." The color drained from Reese's face, replaced by a deep, blotchy red of humiliation. "Please, Robert, don't do this," Helen begged, stepping forward, her hand reaching for him. "We can talk. We can work this out. I made a mistake. A terrible mistake, I know, but we have 31 years together. It can't end like this." Robert looked at her then, truly looked at her. And for the first time, she saw something in his eyes she had never seen before. Nothing. A complete and total void. Indifference. 31 years, he repeated, his voice slow and deliberate. "You're right. 31 years of trust, of partnership, of building a life, and you threw it all away for a 4-month fling at the gym." He gestured with his chin towards Reese, his disgust palpable. "Congratulations, Helen. You traded everything. For this." He raised his phone again, aimed it at them, and took a photo. The flash was a harsh, white burst of light, capturing them in the doorway, Reese in his gym shorts, Helen in her hotel robe, both frozen in a tableau of shame. Helen cried out, trying to cover her face, but it was too late. He put the phone away. He looked at them one last time, a long, final look that sealed their fate. Then he turned and walked away. Before he reached the elevator, he stopped in the hallway. Without turning back, his voice echoed down the quiet corridor. "My lawyers will have everything by the end of the day," he said. "You two enjoy the hotel. It will be the last peaceful moment you have for a very long time." And then he was gone, leaving only a heavy, ringing silence in his wake. Robert did not go home. He drove, not towards the quiet suburb that was no longer his sanctuary, but to a small, anonymous coffee shop downtown. He sat in a corner booth, the sounds of clinking mugs and cheerful chatter a world away from the silent devastation in his mind. He didn't order anything. He just sat there and, with a surgical precision he normally reserved for complex logistical problems at work, he began to dismantle the life Helen had so carelessly broken. The grief was a vast, cold ocean inside him, but on its surface, his mind was a platform of ice clear, hard, and unyielding. He would not be the victim in this story. He would be the architect of its consequences. His first call was to David Sterling, the most ruthless divorce attorney in Denver. Robert had met him once at a corporate function. The man was known as the Shark for a reason. "David, it's Robert Thorne," he said when the call was answered, his voice a flat monotone. "I need to hire you. My wife is having an affair. I have irrefutable evidence." He explained the situation with the cold, detached clarity of a man reading a quarterly report. There was no emotion, only facts. The hotel, the name, the photo, the corporate card. By the end of the 10-minute call, the Shark was hired, and the first gears of the legal machine were turning. His second and third calls were harder. He dialed Brenda's number. "Robert, is everything okay?" she asked, her voice warm and friendly. It felt like a betrayal in itself. "Brenda, I have to tell you something," Robert said, and then he laid it all out. He told her about the lie, about the hotel, about Reese. He told her that her name, and Charlotte's, had been used as a cover story. There was a long, stunned silence on the other end of the line. That line. "Oh, Robert, I am so sorry," Brenda finally said, her shock turning to fury. "To use us like that, after 20 years of friendship, I don't even know what to say." The call with Charlotte was much the same. Shock, followed by disgust, and a deep sense of betrayal. "She lied to you, she lied to us," Charlotte said, her voice sharp. "I don't want a person like that in my life." Robert felt a grim, hollow satisfaction. He wasn't just exposing an affair. He was severing the lifelines of complicity, intentional or not. Helen's carefully constructed world was beginning to fracture. Next, he opened his laptop. He composed an email. The recipient was the general manager of the high-end gym where Reese worked, a place that prided itself on its professionalism and family-friendly reputation. The subject line was simple: unethical conduct concerning trainer Reese Sterling. In the body of the email, Robert detailed the situation calmly and factually. He described how Reese Sterling had initiated an inappropriate relationship with a married client, Helen Thorne. He detailed the deception of the trip and attached a redacted copy of the hotel charge from the corporate card. He finished by stating that this behavior was a profound breach of professional ethics and put the gym's reputation at risk. He did not include the photo. It was too personal. He didn't need it. The financial evidence was enough. He pressed send. Only then, after the calls were made and the email was sent, did he allow himself to feel the full weight of it all. He sat in the coffee shop, the noise fading into a dull hum. He thought of 31 years. 31 years of anniversaries, of raising children, of shared jokes and silent understandings. 31 years of trust. He had believed their marriage was a solid, tangible thing. Now he saw it for what it had become, a hollowed-out structure, eaten from the inside by termites of deceit, and he had been living in it, oblivious. The days that followed were a blur of calculated actions. He had the locks on the house changed. He packed Helen's things himself, clothes, books, personal items, and put them in storage. It was a strange, painful process, like curating a museum exhibit for a life that was now over. Each object held a memory, now tainted. Her calls went unanswered. Her dozens of text messages pleading, angry, desperate were left unread before he blocked her number. He instructed his lawyer that all communication was to go through him. The silence, he knew, was a far more potent weapon than any angry words he could have shouted. The fallout was swift and brutal. Reese was suspended from the gym within 24 hours, pending an internal investigation. 3 days later, he was fired. The story, stripped of names but rich in detail, spread like wildfire through the tight-knit community of gym members and trainers. Reese Sterling's reputation in Denver's fitness scene was ruined. Helen, forced to find a temporary place to stay, soon learned that her social safety net had vanished. Brenda and Charlotte refused to take her calls. Other friends, hearing the story, grew distant. She had not only betrayed her husband, she had made fools of her closest friends, and that was a sin few were willing to forgive. During the initial divorce proceedings, her lawyer argued that she was entitled to half of everything, a reward for her 31 years as a wife and partner. That was when David Sterling, the shark, presented the mountain of evidence Robert had collected. The text messages between Helen and Reese, recovered from a cloud backup Robert still had access to. The credit card statements, meticulously detailed. The hotel reservation. Affidavits from Brenda and Charlotte confirming the deception. The judge's decision was overwhelmingly in Robert's favor. Robert kept the house, the majority of their savings, and the bulk of the retirement account he had so carefully built. Helen was left with her own small pension, one of the older cars, and a settlement that was a fraction of what she had expected. She was forced to move into a small, rented apartment on the far outskirts of the city, a world away from the comfortable life she had so casually destroyed. 2 weeks after the confrontation at the Omni, Helen received a final text message from Reese. It was brief and cowardly. He told her he couldn't handle the consequences. He'd lost his job, his clients, his reputation, all because of her. He thought it was best they went their separate ways. And just like that, she was alone. No husband, no lover, no friends, no home. She was an island of her own making, adrift in the consequences of a 4-month illusion. In the heavy silence of the house, Robert was haunted. Every room held a ghost of the life he thought he'd had. He saw Helen laughing in the kitchen, saw her reading in the armchair by the fireplace, saw the indentation of her head on the pillow next to him, a space that now felt as vast and cold as a glacier. The house wasn't a home anymore. It was a mausoleum, a monument to 31 years of lies. He had won the house in the divorce, but it was a hollow victory. He couldn't stay there. He made a decision with the same swift, unsentimental clarity that had guided him since that fateful Friday morning. He called a real estate agent. He put the house on the market. He didn't want to sift through 3 decades of shared memories, so he sold it furnished, a time capsule for another family to paint over and make their own. He bought a modern condominium on the 10th floor of a high-rise building downtown. It was all glass and steel, with wide windows that offered a panoramic view of the city skyline. It had no history, no echoes of a shared past, no ghosts. It was a blank slate. The process of moving was a process of purging. He went through old photo albums, his movements methodical. He carefully removed every picture of Helen, pictures of them on their wedding day, young and impossibly hopeful, pictures with their newborn children, pictures from vacations, from holidays, from a lifetime together. He stacked them neatly in a box, not out of sentiment, but out of a need for order. He would not look at them again. When he was done, he sealed the box and put it in the back of a closet, a sealed tomb of a former life. He started to build a new routine, not the comfortable, predictable one of the past, but one of deliberate discovery. He signed up for a cooking class, something Helen had always scoffed at. He learned to make pasta from scratch, the rhythmic kneading of the dough a strangely therapeutic act. He joined a book club, reconnecting with old friends he had neglected during the suffocating comfort of his marriage. He started saying yes to invitations he would have once declined. He began to travel. He visited his children more often, not as part of a parental unit, but as just their father. He saw the relief in their eyes that they no longer had to walk on the eggshells of their parents' broken marriage. He took a trip to the coast, to places Helen had never shown any interest in seeing. He walked on beaches alone, listened to the crash of the waves, and felt a strange, new sense of freedom. Slowly, painfully, Robert discovered that there was a life beyond the one he had assumed would last forever. This new life was different, quieter, more solitary, but it was also his own. It was authentic. It was real. He never spoke to Helen again. All communication was filtered through their lawyers, sterile and impersonal emails finalizing the division of their former life. When the final divorce decree arrived in the mail, he didn't feel sadness or anger. He felt only a profound sense of relief, as if a massive, suffocating weight had finally been lifted from his shoulders. He didn't think about dating. The wound was too deep, the betrayal too raw. He needed time to heal, to rediscover who he was when he was not Robert and Helen. He needed to learn to trust his own judgment again, to believe that not everyone was living a secret life, but he knew that one day, he would be ready. And when that day came, he would choose someone who valued honesty as much as he did. Someone who understood that trust, once shattered, could never be perfectly pieced back together. The cracks would always remain. One evening, a full year after that day at the hotel, Robert sat on the balcony of his new condo. The sun was setting over Denver, painting the sky in fiery strokes of orange and purple. He was drinking a cup of coffee, the steam warming his hands in the cool evening air. His phone buzzed on the small table beside him. He glanced at the screen. It was another automatic bank alert. This time, it was a notification that one of his investment accounts had reached a new milestone. He smiled, a wry, bitter little smile. He remembered, with perfect clarity, how exactly this kind of notification had changed his life forever. 12 minutes, just 12 minutes after she had left the house, the alert had arrived, shattering a lie that could have lasted for months, or even years. He shivered at the thought. What would have happened if he hadn't received that alert? If he had continued to live in his fool's paradise, oblivious and trusting? The thought was more terrifying than the truth itself. He picked up his phone and opened his photo gallery. He had deleted every other picture of her, every digital reminder of their marriage, but he had kept one, the picture he had taken in the doorway of room 412. Helen and Reese, frozen in their moment of shame. He looked at it now. He didn't keep it out of anger, or a desire for revenge. He kept it as a reminder that trust is fragile, that people can change, or reveal sides of themselves you never imagined existed, that vigilance isn't paranoia when your gut is screaming at you that something is wrong. He stared at the photo for a long moment, at the faces of the two people who had destroyed his world. Then, with a final, decisive tap of his thumb, he deleted it. He didn't need it anymore. The lesson was already engraved on his soul. That night, Robert dined alone at a new restaurant downtown he'd been wanting to try. It was a small, elegant place with low lighting and the quiet hum of conversation. He sat at a small table for two, but he didn't feel out of place. He chatted with the waiter about the menu, savored a glass of good red wine, and watched the people around him. Couples sharing meals, their heads close together in intimate conversation, groups of friends laughing loudly, and other solitary people like himself, enjoying their own company. He felt a strange sensation, somewhere between nostalgia and liberation. The life he had built with Helen was gone. It was in the past, and he had finally made peace with that. The future was an unknown territory, a blank map waiting to be filled in. But for the first time in a very long while, Robert felt like he was the one holding the pen. He was in control of his own story. He was no longer the betrayed husband, the pitiable victim of an elaborate lie. He was a man who had faced the ugliest truth imaginable and had walked out the other side. He was stronger for it, more aware, freer. When Robert returned home that night, he paused at the entrance to his condo building and looked up. He could see the lights of his apartment on the 10th floor, a warm glow against the dark sky. That space was his. Built by him, for him. There were no false commitments hanging in the air, no broken promises lingering in the corners. He went upstairs, stepped inside, and took off his shoes. The silence that greeted him was not the heavy, oppressive silence of his old house. It was a peaceful silence, a welcoming one. He sat on the couch, the one he had picked out himself, and gazed out at the sprawling, glittering tapestry of the city below. The lights twinkled like a million tiny promises, and for the first time since that awful, world-shattering day at the Omni, Robert Thorne smiled. It was not a bitter smile, or a sarcastic one. It was a genuine, quiet smile of contentment. The smile of a man who had finally, against all odds, found peace. That 12-minute alert had shattered an illusion, but it had also saved him from a lifetime of comfortable lies. And for that, strangely, he was grateful, because the truth, no matter how brutal, is always, always better. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next.